Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, otherwise known as Hypnot Hooray Online, and this is podcast episode 21. So in this podcast episode, I have one finished object to share. I have some updates on some long-term whips. I have two new cast-ons. One of them is a test knit, and the second is what I would consider my first spring knitting plan, and I have a few acquisitions to share at the end. So I was going to say I'm going to start with my finished objects, but I am going to share what I'm wearing today because I always forget, and I want to try to mention it at the beginning of each episode because there's always some questions in the comments. And I should just mention it in the video just to clarify things. So today I'm wearing the Jenny Jacket V-neck, which is a finished object that was in my last podcast episode. It's one of my recent projects that I finished, and I love this cardigan. I love the smock stitch, but there is one thing that I'm noticing after wearing it for the last few weeks. It is quite cropped when I knit it. I would say I think I cropped it by about 5 centimeters, and I'm finding that with wear, the cardigan kind of wants to pull back like this. So the front of the cardigan becomes even more cropped. So I'm not loving that. I kind of wish that I knit the cardigan a little bit longer for this reason, or maybe have made some adjustments to the front panels here, maybe picked up more stitches here so the V-neck wasn't as wide like this, or maybe adjusted the double knit button band, because I think that's kind of the main problem. I would be happy with the length of the cardigan if it didn't pull back like this and pull up the bottom of the front of the cardigan. So yeah, I don't know. I that's something I wish I would have changed after wearing that. So if you are knitting this cardigan, maybe consider that as you're knitting it, because I won't be ripping back the double knit button band to add some length to the body. Yeah, I won't be doing that. I still like how it looks. That's just one thing that I didn't really notice before. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm finding the cardigan is fitting. But overall, really happy with it, and that's what I'm wearing today. So for the finished object, I don't have it here because it was a very late Christmas gift to my boyfriend's mom, Grace. I knit the Cloudburst Mittens, which is a pattern by Adrienne Gray. So I don't have the gloves. I'll insert some photos here, but I do have the yarn to chat about. So the Cloudburst Mittens is a fingerless glove pattern. It's worked bottom up on 3mm needles. I use 2.25 millimeter needles, but we'll get into that when I chat more about the project details. And the glove pattern has a lace motif along the top of the gloves, and the underside of the gloves and the thumb is worked in stockinette, and the hems are worked in 1x1 twisted rib. So in terms of the pattern, it's a free pattern download on Ravelry, and I think that the pattern is great. It's very clearly written, super easy to follow. There is written instructions for the lace motif as well as a lace chart. And something that I mentioned in my last podcast episode, which was super handy, is the legend key for the lace chart is on the same page as the chart, so you're not having to flip through multiple pages in the pattern to read the chart. So a nice layout as well. But I would say that the lace motif was super intuitive. So after the first lace repeat, I don't even think I really needed to look at the chart anymore because it makes it really, the lace motif is really easy to read. The yarn overs kind of move towards the center of the fingerless glove and then it repeats. So you can almost read your work and know where the next yarn over or the next knit two together is going to go. So overall, a very intuitive pattern. This pattern is also super easy to work on 2 needles like Magic Loop or Addy Crazy Trios or Flexi Flips like I chose to use, because the lace motif is on one half of the fingerless gloves, and then the other half is where you do the shaping for the thumb gusset and then the stockinette for the underside of the mitten. So you can keep track of where the lace is going because it's on one needle, and then the stockinette and the shaping for the thumb gusset is on the other needle. So super easy to follow. The pattern is just written for one size. It was written for a adult women's medium, and I would say that it fit my hands really well. I sized down to 2.25 millimeter needles, so I would say that the glove is a little bit smaller than what was intended in the pattern, but I would say that it fits me pretty well. I have a pretty small hand and pretty short fingers, but I would say that this pattern is really easy to modify as well. You could just cast on more stitches at the beginning and work that in stockinette, so the lace panel is still just there but a little bit more narrow, because there might be some stockinette stitches on either side. So I think that's a pretty easy modification for the width. And then for the length, you could just work maybe another repeat of the lace chart pattern just to extend the length. So I would say it's pretty easy to customize even though there's only one size. And in terms of the yarn, I loved working with both of these. I've worked with both of these in the past, so I knew I was going to like them. They're really great. Oenling number 11 is unfortunately discontinued, but it's a lovely yarn, so I don't want to talk about it too much because you can't get it anymore, but it's a really nice yarn. It makes me want to try more Oenling yarn in the future. And then Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair is an obvious favorite for me. I use it in a ton of projects, so I knew pairing them together was going to work really well for the gloves. I initially tried to knit the gloves with just the fingering weight, which is what the pattern calls for, but I guess that this yarn is a little bit more on the thinner side of fingering weight yarn, because when I knit the gauge swatch, it was very thin and the fabric wasn't it was very loose, and so I figured it wasn't going to work that well for a glove pattern that already had lace in it. It wasn't going to be a very warm glove, and when you might feel like it's warm enough to wear the glove, it's probably too warm to even wear a glove in the first place. So I decided to bring in some mohair to add some warmth. It does kind of diffuse the lace motif a little bit. It's not as like sharp or clear to see the motif, but I think the mohair really helps add some warmth to the mittens. I ended up needing to use less than 1 ball of both of these yarns, so I used 15 grams of Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair, and I wrote it down because I was already going to forget, 20 grams of Oenling number 11. So this project is really great as a palette cleanser project, or if you have any single ball skeins from other garment projects that you were maybe knitting, or if you have a special fingering weight skein in your stash that you wanted to use for a special project, this would be great because you need less than 1 ball. So a pretty economical project, and overall I'm really happy with it. I had a lot of fun knitting it, and I hope, Grace, if you're watching right now, you're really enjoying the gloves as well, because I think that they fit really nice and they're pretty warm even though they have the lace motif because of the mohair. So that was my first finished object, and before we get into the whips, I wanted to chat about Squarespace, who is the sponsor of today's video. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform with everything you need to grow your business and get paid, which is why I think it's perfect for fiber artists and designers who want to create a website to sell digital patterns, publish blog posts, or grow your community with marketing tools. Over the next few months, I'll be using Squarespace to build my own website, and Squarespace makes it easy with a few tailored questions. You can use Blueprint AI, which is Squarespace's AI-enhanced website builder, or you can choose from a curated set of professionally designed templates, which is what I chose to do. And as someone with pretty limited design experience, I found the process was super intuitive, browsing through the templates, choosing the color palette, fonts, and the drag and drop editing allow you to personalize your website. So check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/hypknithooray and use the code hypknithooray to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So thanks again, Squarespace, and back to whips. I have my first whip here that I want to chat about, which is my Peacock Cardigan. So this is a long-term whip on the channel. I'm hoping to finish it soon. Hopefully you're not tired of hearing about it, but here it is. I haven't really worked on it that much since the last podcast episode because I have my 2 new cast-ons, but I did finish the first sleeve here, and then I'm working on the second sleeve. So the Peacock Cardigan is a top-down round yoke lace cardigan. I'm using Hitsuji Chan Natural as my main wool, and I'm holding it with Knitting for Olive, a soft silk mohair in the shade Hazel, the same yarn that I used for my finished object. And in my last podcast episode, I think I was debating between the two sleeve options because I was modifying the sleeves so they had a few more decreases in them because I didn't really like how loose the sleeves kind of fit. So I had two different variations and I ended up not going with either of those, and I redid this sleeve for the third time and I changed the decrease rate. And it's something that I'm really happy with, so I am just going with it and doing that for the second sleeve here. I am doing kind of a gradual taper. It's very, very subtle, so I feel like you might not even be able to notice it, but it's one of those things where for some reason I just got really bothered by it, the different decreases and trying to figure out which one fits best. But they were just all subtle differences at the end of the day. The one that I landed on though was to decrease every 8 rows. I think 7 times. So until this marker here, I was decreasing every 8 rows. And then after that, for the rest of the sleeve here, I was decreasing every 12 rows. So by the end of the sleeve, it's a little bit more of a straight fitting sleeve. It doesn't taper as quickly. And then I just followed the pattern and worked a very short section of 1x1 rib. So now I am working on the second sleeve here. I would say I am 75% done this sleeve, and then I have a lot more of the mohair left than I thought, so I can go back to the body and finish knitting the body. I do think though that I'm going to maybe keep it to this length because I really like the look of more cropped cardigans like this to wear over dresses and skirts, which is kind of how I envision wearing it. So I don't really want to knit the body that much longer, but I'm going to go on to that next. And then I have the button band and the neckline to go. So I'm really hoping that this could be a finished object in my next podcast episode because I've been working on it for a while, but I have made a lot of modifications. The modifications will continue because I do think that I'm going to do the double knit button band, probably like a thin double knit button band along the side here, but if that doesn't really work out and I don't really like how it looks, I'll just do the 1x1 rib, which is how it is written in pattern. And then after that, the last thing I'll have to do is pick up stitches to work the neckband. So not a lot of updates on the Peacock Cardigan, but slowly getting there, and excited to have this done soon. The next finished object I have is, I'll share this one here. This is the Lulu Slipover by Petite Knit. The Lulu Slipover Chunky, by Petite Knit. I'm using Briggs and Little Regal in the shade Dark Gray. And I'm knitting this on 4.5 millimeter needles. I think the suggested needle size is 5 millimeter needles. But I sized down to achieve gauge, and here it is so far. The Lulu Slipover is, I would say, a top-down slipover, but not really in the round because the whole piece, except for the neckband here, is worked flat. The back and the front panels don't attach. So it's a pretty simple and easy knit. It's top down. You work some increases here to shape the armhole. So you work them at a different rate. I would say you have more increases towards the bottom of the armhole here to work enough increases so the slipover is wide enough along your hips. And then you work a really long panel of 1x1 rib at the bottom. I would say that this is really hard to hold up because it's just worked in stockinette, and since it's worked flat, the back and the front panel just want to curl in on itself, so I feel like it doesn't look very nice right now, but I have to add all of the trim on at the end. So for the back and the front panel, I am knitting a size small, and I worked the panels to pattern until I reached the bottom, because I wanted to shorten the slipover a little bit more. In some of the versions that I've seen online, on Ravelry and on Instagram, I kind of like the look of a more cropped slipover. So I shortened the body here by about 6 centimeters, I want to say. So really after working the armhole increases, I didn't work that much stockinette. It was only this small section here before I worked the 1x1 rib. But something that I kind of realized while doing that is the Lulu Slipover has two pretty large button closures along the sides. And both of those buttons are 10mm buttons. I already have the ones that I think I'm going to use. So when I realized that by cropping the Slipover here a little bit, it would kind of impact how I was going to place those two large buttons, because if this panel here is a little bit too short, then the buttons are going to be too close together and it's not going to look very nice. So I took the two buttons that I'm thinking of using, because I already have 20mm buttons already. I placed them here already, and I think they're placed far enough where it's still going to be functional. But if that doesn't work, I think I'll just use either smaller buttons or maybe just one of those two large buttons, and then just have one button here for the closure. Either way, I think I'll have options, but something to keep in mind if you're going to crop the body of the Slipover. Hopefully it turns out well, but either way, I can go with either of those. And yeah, that's kind of my update so far on this. The front and the back were super quick to knit up. They're actually pretty narrow right now too, because you have so much of that finishing work to add on afterwards. So it's kind of really hard to see how this Slipover is going to look at the moment, but these panels were super quick to knit up, and then now you have some of the more tedious finishings to work, but I think that they look really nice, so worth it in the end. But that's the progress so far on my Lulu Slipover. And then the next long-term whip that I have now that I'm also hoping to finish soon is my Marie pillow. So this pillow I've been working on for a really long time because it's worked on small needles and it's a slip stitch pattern. So I find that I can only work on it a little bit before my hands start to hurt. And I'm in the middle of a row right now, which I probably shouldn't have done, but here it is right now. I worked since, I can't remember which marker it was, maybe this marker here. I did a lot of this pillow a few weeks ago, and then I just haven't really worked on it since, because I noticed that my gauge has changed a lot since the beginning of this pillow. I'm gonna hold it up and maybe you'll be able to tell. Okay, it's gonna be hard because I'm in the middle of my row right now, but I got a much looser tension, or I was knitting at a much looser tension around this point of the pillow here. So you can see that the panel kind of goes out a lot like that, and I didn't really realize that until I had set it down and kind of like folded it in half, and I realized how much bigger it was. And I figured because it's kind of close to the middle of the pillow, it would be okay, because this is just going to be the front panel of a pillow, and then you sew on a fabric backing for the back panel. So since I was going to be sewing this to a fabric panel, the extra fabric here is just going to be part of the inside of that pillow. So I figured it was okay, but I did want to try to bring in the tension a little bit more towards the top of the pillow, just to kind of match the cast on here. So I sized down even more to 2.5mm needles. I couldn't remember if it was 2mm or 2.5, but sized down even further to 2.5mm needles, and it has brought in the fabric a little bit more, and my tension is a little bit tighter, but that means that this is even harder on my hands to knit. It's garter slip stitch texture on 2.5mm needles with worsted weight yarn. So yeah, it's not the easiest to work up, but I'm almost done, and I figured that was kind of the only way that I could adjust the tension, because I don't think I could try to train myself to knit at the same tension that I did at the bottom. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, but I think I have around 4 centimeters left before I reach the point where I can just cast off this panel. And the fabric panel I ordered off of the Petite Knit website. It came in as well, so I just have to block this, and then I think I'm gonna wash and block that fabric as well. I'm very new to sewing, so I don't really know a lot about how finished fabric kind of performs after sewing, but I think I'm going to wash that and then iron it, and then I can just sew it onto this panel and it should be okay. So yeah, hopefully this will be a finished object soon as well. And if I didn't already mention, but you probably already know because I mention it in a lot of podcast episodes now at this point, I'm using Knit Picks Wool of the Andes undyed yarn, and then Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool in the shade Brown Heather. So a really nice long-term project. Excited to have this as some living room decor. And those are my long-term whips. And now I have my new cast-ons, which I'm really excited to share. So I think I'll start with the Lakes cardigan, which is a test knit that I'm doing for Ozetta. I have been eagerly awaiting the pattern for the Lakes cardigan. I have knit and was part of the test knit for the Lakes pullover, the Lakes v-neck pullover, and the Lakes tee. So it's a construction that I'm very familiar with and I really enjoy the fit of. And so I have been waiting and waiting and waiting for the Lakes cardigan. So as soon as the test call came out, I was like, I have to apply. I've taken a bit of a break from test knitting. I used to test knit a lot more in the past. And I really like test knitting because I like having a deadline associated with a project sometimes, because some of the whips that I mentioned before, I can spend months and months and months on, which is fine. Like, it's all part of the making process. I don't mind. But sometimes I kind of like having a little bit of pressure and having a deadline to work towards for a project. And I find it's really fun to work with the designer and other test knitters and kind of do like a knit along with other knitters for a project. So I took a little bit of a break from test knitting, but we're back, and Haley is a fantastic designer to test knit for. So yeah, enough gushing about the test knit process, but here is the cardigan here. I am using 2 yarns. This yarn, I don't really know what it is. It's from my grandma's yarn stash. She doesn't knit anymore, so a lot of the yarn that she has is stored at my parents' place, and I took some of this a while ago, and I'm pretty sure it is a wool yarn. It feels like 100%, kind of like maybe like a natural wool. But I don't really know what the yarn is, and I don't think my grandma would remember. So I'm using this yarn here, and I'm holding it with Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in the shade Dark Mousse. And so far I'm really liking how the finished fabric is working up. It has a nice dimension to it because I didn't really realize that the dark mousse kind of has like a gray undertone to it, and this yarn here has a pretty warm undertone. And when I was just holding it together, I was like, they're both dark brown, it's gonna work really well. And I was trying to work from stash, but knit up, there's actually some marling to the fabric, and I really like how it's knitting up so far. So I'm really happy with this yarn choice. And the Lakes cardigan is knit at a worsted gauge on 5.5 millimeter needles, but for Ozetta designs, I always have to size down half a needle size or sometimes a full needle size. So I'm knitting this cardigan on 5 millimeter needles, and so far I have this much of the cardigan done. I kind of need to get a little bit of a move on because I need to finish this in a few weeks. But it's knitting up pretty quickly on 5 millimeter needles. If you haven't knit a Lakes series design before, I would say it's pretty popular in the knitting community, but if you haven't before, the 2 saddle shoulders are knit separately. They're just like this, like a rectangular panel, and then you pick up stitches along the back to work the back panel. There's some short rows there, and then you pick up stitches along both fronts, and then there's also some short rows along the top of the panel here as well, to create more of a slope for the shoulder here, and then you're working increases to shape the V neckline. Once you join this cardigan in the round, that's when you also stop shaping the v-neck. So I would say it's a pretty shallow v-neck. And then the rest of this cardigan, I'm just going to be knitting back and forth in stockinette. So it's going to be a really nice, relaxing knit. And yeah, that's kind of all I have to share on this cardigan. I'm actually filming a project vlog, my first ever project vlog for this project here. So I don't really want to say too much because I don't want to repeat myself in that vlog, even though I just gave a lot of details right now. But yeah, look out for that video. That's probably going to come out before my next podcast, where this will be a finished object. So yeah, I'm excited to be filming that vlog, and this I think is a really nice project to have a dedicated video for, because there's lots of shaping, there's lots of details in this cardigan. I would say Ozetta patterns are always really simple and easy to follow. There's lots of details, very helpful tips. So excited to chat about that more in that vlog. And this is where I'm at with the cardigan. And then my last whip that I wanted to chat about is my spring cast on, and it is this here. I ended up going with the Tulip loop sweater. So this cast on relates to my last video that I posted, the kind of random video, but I thought it was really fun to film the cable sweaters for spring pattern inspiration and kind of chatting through picking my next project video. So in that video, I will link it up here if you haven't seen it. Because yeah, it was really fun. I thought it was some nice inspiration for spring, but I was chatting about this sweater here and it was kind of my first choice. In the YouTube comments, thank you so much to everybody who left a comment and gave suggestions or encouraged me to cast on the Tulip loop. That sweater was probably the most common suggestion. And so I was like, you know what? I will try and do it and knit it off gauge, and we're going to see, but I just thought that this color would be perfect for spring and for the Tulip loop motif. So this is Knitting for Olive, or sorry, not Knitting for Olive, it's Knit Picks palette. I think I'm just used to saying Knitting for Olive because I was using it for all of my other whips, but this is Knit Picks palette and Aloft. Aloft is the Mohair, both in the shade Tarragon. And so this is a fingering weight 100% Peruvian Highland wool, and then a very basic lace weight strand of Mohair, but held together it's kind of more of a DK weight, and the suggested yarn for the Tulip loop is more of a worsted weight. So I knew that the sweater was going to have to be knit off gauge. So instead of 4.5 millimeter needles, I'm using 3.75 millimeter needles, and I'm knitting a size medium and kind of hoping that it's going to end up like a extra small or small, kind of in between those. I knit my gauge swatch and kind of measured, but I didn't do a lot of calculations to make sure it was going to work. So I'm kind of hoping the medium is going to fit like that. But if not, I think I could just cast on more stitches at the underarm if I want to add a little bit more width. And maybe I'll do like a mid-project block for the back panel once I'm done, because I know that the Knit Picks palette, especially, just working with this same yarn combination but in a different color for the Jenny jacket, the palette really does bloom a lot and the yarn really expands after blocking, so I also think that that's going to help as well. But yeah, here I am with the back panel. I did a few modifications. So the first one I already mentioned, change the size, knitting on 3.75 millimeter needles. And then the second is I am modifying the back panel here, so there's not that triangular section of stockinette, because I just didn't really like how it looked on the back, and I just didn't think it was worth all of the effort of all the shaping for it. So I modified the back panel so it works just like the front, and it was actually a very simple modification. I took a look at the stitch count for the front panel and how the cable stitches are situated along the panel, and the front panel is only one stitch off from the back panel. I'm not really sure why. I guess it's just the way that it the stitch count corresponds with the triangular stockinette panel here, but it's one stitch off. So for the back panel here, all I had to do was cast on one extra stitch than what is suggested what is the suggested stitch count in the pattern, and then I just took a look at the front panel and set up the rows for the rib and the cables to correspond to that. So I will put a picture of this on my Ravelry and add some details to my project notes if you want to do the same thing, but it's very simple and it looks like you can do that for all the different sizes. I think all the sizes were 1 stitch off, so it's fairly simple. And then once you cast on for the back panel, you do some short rows, not a lot, but you do some to create that sloped shoulder here. And one thing that I didn't really think about is the short rows create a little bit more stockinette in the center back here. So you don't really have to work this tulip cable very often, but I actually didn't work it. And then when it was time to work the first tulip cable, which is this one here, I realized that it kind of looked a little bit strange to not have one worked closer to the top of that back panel. So I ended up laddering back down. I didn't frog, but I laddered back down and did that cable, which was pretty easy to do actually, surprisingly so, but I do think that the tension does look a little bit funny, so I'm kind of hoping that that blocks out. But again, I'll add that in my Ravelry notes. I added a cable just on that middle tulip cable there at the top. And then now I'm just working the rest of the sweater just straight down like the front. And then I'll pick up stitches to work the 2 front panels afterwards, but really happy with how this is working up. One last thing that I think I'll mention about this as well is I am using combination knitting to kind of make the ribbing look a little bit neater, and I think it's kind of working, but also the ribbing is not the neatest, and I think it kind of has to do with the yarn because it is a fingering weight, and mohair because it's more of a thinner fabric and a looser gauge. The ribbing doesn't look as neat. You can kind of see it here, but the knit stitch before you go to the rib stitch, especially in the rib panel here, it looks a little bit wonky. It's like these panels here. So they look a little bit wonky. So I have been using combination knitting to try and tighten them up a little bit. And I'm hoping that with blocking, it's also going to help a little bit. But essentially what I'm doing is on the right side row, the first purl stitch after the knit stitch, I am knitting backwards. So I'm wrapping the yarn clockwise. And then when I go onto the wrong side row, the stitch is mounted onto the needle backwards because I twisted the yarn backwards. So then I am knitting through the back loop and also wrapping clockwise or backwards as well. And that just creates a tighter purl stitch on the right side or a tighter knit stitch on the wrong side to kind of cinch in that part of the rib there. And I think it has helped a little bit, but it's not perfect. But that's kind of, I think, the best adjustment that I could make to kind of make the ribbing look a little bit more even. If you have any other suggestions for that, I'd love to know down below. I think that blocking will also help, but that's kind of what I've done so far to create some more neater rib there. And yeah, just have a lot more of this sweater to go, but I just cast it on and I'm really happy with how it looks. I love the tulip cable here. I think it looks so cute in this green and it's a really nice spring project. So that was my last whip that I wanted to share. And then I have a few acquisitions. The first one I wanted to share is a knitting book. So I watched Hanan Bane on YouTube, her Everything I Knit in 2024 video, and I saw her Sunny Side Up socks, which is a pattern in the sock project book by Summerly Knits. And I was obsessed with those socks. I think they're so great. I think if you haven't seen that video, I will link it down below because I think Hanan has such an eye for color combination and all the things that she knit last year were so beautiful. So yeah, I was knit-fluenced, but I told myself that I didn't really want to get another sock book until I knit a pair from the first book that I got, Charming Colorwork Socks. The problem with that book is the color work in those patterns seem to be pretty straightforward, but I don't really have the basics of sock knitting down, like knowing the correct stitch count, what heel works for me, the length of the foot. So it's just been it's been a bit intimidating trying to say that I'm going to knit from that pattern book, because a lot of those socks are all over color work, or you're using multiple colors. So I just haven't yet, but I saw the Sunny Side Up socks that Hanan knit, and then I checked out the book, and I think there are enough patterns in this book to make it worth the cost for me. And Summer has written a lot of basic sock recipes in this book, so to me I thought it was kind of worth it to get this book to be more motivated to knit some more socks and try out some constructions. And I would also get the pattern for the Sunny Side Up socks because I really want to knit those, and I think that one is maybe a more approachable first colorwork sock project than the ones in the Charming Colorwork Socks book. So I got this book, and I'm excited to try out some of the patterns in this book. Now that I have this book here, there are a ton of basic sock recipes, different heel constructions, so I think I definitely have the basis to knit some vanilla socks and try out some constructions that work really well for me. So yeah, I think I'm set with the basics with this book here. It's very well written. It's very Summer-esque. I like watching Summer on YouTube, her YouTube channel as well. And I think she's so fun, and this book is also a super fun book. There's a lot of funny anecdotes in it, and the techniques are really nice, and there's a lot of nice color inspiration in this book as well. So yeah, I'll be knitting some socks from this book in the months to come, because I do want to get better at knitting socks for myself. So this is the first acquisition, and then the second acquisition kind of relates to it because it is some sock yarn. So a local yarn store to me, Good Grief Yarn and Provisions, I would say it's kind of my local yarn store now that the Romney on Queen West closed down, sadly. This is the next closest yarn shop to me, so I kind of like going in to browse, and I saw that Mariah posted a 50% off flash sale one day on her story, and I saw that, and I just couldn't resist not getting something from the shop. It was an impulse buy, but I have used Mariah's yarn. So Mariah is the owner of the yarn shop, and she also hand dyes yarn, and I have worked with her yarn in the past before, this really beautiful purple colorway. And so with it being 50% off, I got 2 more skeins, and then I also got some other yarn to start knitting some more socks as well. So I will grab the yarn. So I got these 2 right here, which are hand dyed by Mariah. So the first one is Pulp Culture. This is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and I really like the bright speckles. I knit the honey bucket bag a few years ago as my graduation gift to myself with a yarn that was kind of similar to this, and I really like how it was knit up, and I can't get that yarn anymore. It's from Artfill, and I just haven't really been able to find it local to me. So this is pretty similar to that, and I think I can get a similar look, and I really like the hot fuchsia pink. And then the second one I got is this green. I just really like a bright green like this, and this is in the shade Candy Apple. So really like these 2 colors. I think I'm going to knit some socks with them, or maybe some ornaments in the future. So if you want to check out a local dyer in Toronto, would highly recommend looking at Good Grief. And then I also got some more sock yarn because I realized that I have a lot of single skein, like 200 meter balls of sock yarn, which I think is enough for a shorty set, but not really enough if you're knitting a calf length or a taller sock. So I got these 2 here because they were a really good deal at 50% off. It was Drops Fable. I got the shade 114, which is this gray, heather gray color, and then 117, which is this periwinkle blue. And I'm going to knit some socks from the sock project book, I think, with these socks, or maybe a lace pair of socks like the Petal Drop socks by Florence Miller. So I have enough now to work some taller socks, and I actually already used the blue to knit this little thing here. This is the Cozy Keys pattern by Amy Whittingham, and I modified it. I'll add some of my notes to a Ravelry project page, but my friend really wanted to have a mini sweater for her keys, so I modified the pattern to be even smaller sweater size, and just wanted to try out the Drops Fable and see how it worked after blocking. And it's a little bit more of a rustic yarn. Drops has another fingering weight yarn that has alpaca in it that I've used before for an Oslo hat, and I would say that this one is a lot more rustic, but hopefully more hard wearing for a pair of socks. So I would say not the softest yarn, but I think it'll be good for socks, and that's why I kind of got these, because I wanted to get sock yarn at a reduced price so I can continue experimenting with sock knitting, because there is a chance that the socks won't fit me. I knit 2 pairs last year that don't really fit, so I don't really wear them, so I didn't want to spend a ton on sock yarn, so I'm glad I could have gotten these at a very good discount. So that was everything for this podcast episode. Thank you for watching, and thank you so much if you reached this point in the video. I am going to continue working away at some of those long-term whips and really focus on my test knit, continue to film my project vlog, so look out for that video. I think I might release a spring knitting plans video as well. I don't know if it's too late and I should just skip it for this season, but I've always done one and I kind of want to. I find them fun to film, so I may also film that, so look for that in the next coming weeks. And until my next video, happy knitting.